Hi there, everybody. It's Hank Linderman. I'm here in Falls of Rough, Kentucky. I'm your Democratic nominee for Congress here in Kentucky's 2nd District. Today it's Thursday, June 18th, and we got a couple things we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about DACA and Seattle and monopolies and innovation. So glad you're here. I've put up the party favor here because we had a second one of these go out to over 1,000 views, and that's pretty darn spectacular. So I'm quite excited about it, and I'm glad you're here. I'm really glad to be here myself. It's only, let me see, 87 degrees. It's nice and warm out, so I've got the ceiling fan on, which you can't see, and you may hear some noises that are the hawk family that lives nearby is making all kinds of whistling and calling noises, so you may see them, and sometimes you may even see one fly by. It's quite a thing to be out here and get buzzed by a hawk who's about this big. Anyway, let's see where we're at. Let's talk about, oh, hi Barbara, I'm glad you're here as well. Let's get to what's going on today. And Bill McNichol is here, by the way. I guess I better go back here. Bill McNichol is here, and Bill is doing a fantastic job. One of the things he's doing is taking these videos and sharing them with other Democratic groups, various Democratic counties, Democratic organizations within counties throughout the 2nd District. Hi, Mark Andes. Bill is also sharing them to Democratic groups outside of the state, because ultimately some of the message we're trying to get across is going to need support from across the country, particularly when we talk about the contract for rural America. And by the way, let me show you, let's show you the contract again. And for those of you that are political junkies, on Monday night before the primary election, Mike Ward is going to be on. He's a former congressman in Louisville. He's going to be interviewed on KET, and he's going to show them the contract for rural and working America, saying that basically Democrats are not giving up on rural America, and that this candidate in the second, Hank Linderman, has this thing called the contract for rural and working America. And, while I think about it, there's a podcast that I want to show you, and I'll show you the screenshot from it so you can find it yourself. But it's an author named Thomas Frank, and the podcast is called This Is Hell. It's from 2 years ago, and it's a fantastic podcast. I've listened to it at least a dozen times, and it really inspires me each time I do it. It's very entertaining as well. But anyway, let's get to what's going on today. You're going to notice that these are the numbers from yesterday, so from June 17th. And we had something like 830 deaths on Tuesday, and so yesterday 809. It's about the same, but the amount of new cases went up significantly. I think we were at 24,000 or 22,000 for Tuesday, and now it's up to 26,000. So we're seeing big surges in the virus, especially in states like California. Here's a global picture. This comes from nakedcapitalism.com. And all the way at the top is global cases. You'll notice that they're all still rising, and that the United States is actually starting to rise again with new cases. So this is quite concerning, and I'm going to show you a little bit of a headline a little bit later on where Dr. Fauci points out that you can't really talk about the second wave until we finish this first one. Anyway, news face masks. Oh, here we go. President Trump called coronavirus testing overrated and suggested in his Wall Street Journal interview today that some people wear masks not as a health precaution, but to signal their disapproval of him. Well, if you'd handled the virus better, buddy, we wouldn't have to wear these damn things, but here's where we are. He also continued to defend his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Notice here also in a video interview with the Washington Post, Anthony Fauci says it's too early to talk about the second wave because we haven't finished the first one yet. So go back to this, that some people signal their disapproval of him by wearing a mask. I don't know if that's always the case. Oh, well, look, there's President Trump wearing a mask. I got to tell you, President Trump, I don't wear a mask to show my disapproval of you. I have other ways I can show my disapproval of you. You know, it's a bother to wear a mask, but in terms of health, it appears to be the thing that works. Keeping your hands washed, avoiding close contact with people, wearing a mask when you're in close quarters, and minimizing the amount of time. So please take care of yourselves. You know, this is an unbelievable time. Hopefully, we'll all be telling our grandchildren about this. And what we had to go through back in the year 2020, and let's hope we can get this thing dealt with soon. But it's going to be a while. Hi, Mary. I'm glad you're here. It's going to be a while before we get this thing under control. So anyway, President Trump, it's okay to wear the mask, and I wish you would wear the mask. That's what leadership should do. News today from the Vatican has urged Catholics to drop their investments in fossil fuels and arms. And I think that's very interesting. If you're Catholic, you do want to at least acknowledge that the Pope was talking to you. They urged Catholics on Thursday to disinvest from armaments and fossil fuel industries and to closely monitor companies in sectors such as mining to see if they're damaging the environment. I think this is great. They talk about practical steps to achieve the goals of the encyclical, but they strongly support agreements to contain global warming and warn against the dangers of climate change. I think this is great. I think there are other messages from the church that are more problematical, but let's focus on this. 40 faith organizations from around the world, more than half of them Catholic, have pledged to divest from fossil fuel companies. By the way, the Catholic Church is quite wealthy. Aren't they the largest landowner in the world? I'm not sure about that. One of you Catholics out there could check that out for me. The Vatican Bank says it doesn't invest in fossil fuels, and many Catholic dioceses and education institutions around the world have taken similar positions. So, okay, let's talk about DACA, which is the deferred action on children that have been brought here by their parents from another country. They've arrived in this country and they've grown up here. These are the so-called dreamers. And the Trump administration tried to undo the work that President Obama had done creating the DACA, creating the dreamers. And the case wound up in the Supreme Court, and boy, the Supreme Court has been busy issuing things this week, so they rejected the Trump bid to end the protections. And President Trump had some questionable thoughts. And now, bear in mind, it's the week after the ruling that it was illegal to fire people because they're gay or transgender. Again, the court did the right thing. This one was a little closer, 5-4 outcome. And apparently Chief Justice Roberts, who's supposed to be conservative, and the 4 liberal justices were in the majority. And this may elevate the issue in Trump's campaign because President Trump is very anti-immigrant and uses a lot of rhetoric and does his best to restrict immigration. He didn't hold back in his assessment of the court's work. This is President Trump. These horrible and politically challenged decisions coming out of the Supreme Court are shotgun blasts into the face of people that are proud to call themselves Republicans or conservatives. We need more justices or we will lose our Second Amendment and everything else. I'm not sure what the everything else is. Really, all we want you to do is lose the presidency and maybe the Senate. Actually, we want the Senate too. Vote Trump 2020, he wrote on Twitter. And I thought it was wonderful that Congressman John Yarmuth responded to his statement of, what did he say? Trump said something else, which was that I get the feeling the Supreme Court doesn't like me. And John Yarmuth responded with, no, they get the feeling you don't like the Constitution. There we are. Let's go back and have a look. I found a very interesting story about research. And we used to have corporate research labs here in the United States, and they were the source of a lot of innovations. And this is a story that you can track down if you want to find it, David Rosenthal, and track down his blog. He's talking about research laboratories like Bell Labs. And Bell Labs example, he's saying the year the year after he was born, Bell Labs invented the transistor. And what a powerful thing that was. But 50 years later, Bell Labs had been gotten rid of as part of the general massacre of labs. Now, this is interesting because this article ties it to the rise and fall of antitrust enforcement, which is monopolies. And for a number of years now, the United States has not been really going after monopolies. I'm trying to remember the last things they went after. One was when Microsoft was bundling Internet Explorer as part of Windows and making it so that other companies couldn't provide browsers. And that was ruled to be a monopolizing action, so they had to get rid of that. Anyway, the idea is, their claim here is that historically many large labs were set up because antitrust pressures constrained their ability to grow through mergers and acquisitions. If you've been paying attention at all to the last 20 years or so, that's how much of what's been going on Wall Street. They're making deals, right? They're making deals, buying this company, buying that company. And the point here is that research and innovation has slowed. They also point out pervasive short-termism. In other words, you know how we always talk about, all we're concerned about is this quarter's profit. Well, that is short-term thinking. And that is what is slowing down innovation in the United States. A successor to the labs is a new division. They've divided up this process into innovative labor, with universities focusing on research, large firms focusing on development and commercialization, and then spin-off startups and university technology licensing offices responsible for connecting the two. But there is no question that we are not doing a great job keeping monopolies in check. I use Amazon fairly often, and I have friends who work for Amazon. They don't necessarily love it, but it pays the best for what they're able to get right now. But that company is so big, and Jeff Bezos has so much money, it's almost difficult to explain how much money the guy has. On the other hand, we kind of don't care if we're being paid fairly. And that is one of the complaints that I make in the contract, is that we just don't pay working people enough. And so that's one of the things we're going to need to face. Let's go back to our headlines. This is Seattle, and if you've been paying attention this week, you know that there's 6 blocks in Seattle, which I think is called Capitol Hill, and it's called Chaz. Let's see what they call. I think it's the Chapel Hill. I can't remember the name of it. It's something zone, but they've kind of locked the police out, and for the moment they're functioning without the police, and there's demonstrations showing up every day. And I spoke to someone at a business in Seattle this week who said, as soon as I get off work, I'm going to go up there too. So a lot of the community is supporting it. But this story in Politico points out that this is being viewed very differently depending on your political outlook. And it appears that what's going on there is nonviolent. There's nothing really, really going on. And no, the police are not being allowed in. But it's not the Center for Antifa, which is what President Trump seems to be saying. It's not that. So I think this is a story to be interested in. But the reason we have these zones, that autonomous zone, that's it, the Chapel Hill Autonomous Zone, the reason we have these is because of public frustration. We're starting to see America get really, really riled up. We're seeing all these protests. I believe protests are still going on in Louisville and in other cities across the country about the police and about the general mistreatment of people of color and African Americans, that we want equality. We want social and economic equality. We don't want to be taken advantage of. And at a certain point, when the government's not listening, when the government is so divided, and there's a purpose to the division as well. when you think about it, we're divided very much in this country in a couple of ways. We're divided between city people and rural people, and I've lived both of those lives, so I understand the differences. And the mindset in the city, when you come to the country, your city mindset doesn't really work, and it's a little bit jarring. When you're here in the country and you travel to the big city, you go, wow, this just doesn't work either. So I understand some of those divisions, but we've also got division between people who work on Wall Street, people who've invested in Wall Street, versus people who work. We have divisions in this country based on race. We have divisions based on income. And healing all that stuff is going to take some work, and it will not come quickly. But I have to believe that some of the division we are dealing with serves someone. It doesn't serve me. I don't believe it serves most of us that are divided. But it does serve someone. And for President Trump to stoke the division the way that he does tells me that he believes it makes a difference for him. Well, let's move on. This is the podcast I would really strongly suggest you get a look at or a listen to. It's called This Is Hell, and look for the one called American Oblivion, and it's author Thomas Frank. And I think you'll find it fascinating, and it's really inspiring. And by the way, yes, don't forget, please, to keep sharing this. The contract for rural America is going to be, we are going to be working to get this spread as an idea across the country. And so you can really help the campaign. It really helps when you contribute. And by the way, just before I went on, I got a contribution. It shows up when you contribute on the website, hankforkentucky.com. I get an email saying someone contributed. So just a few minutes ago, someone contributed. So thank you. And that makes a difference. But it also helps when you share this, because we ultimately want to get this kind of conversation going forward. We need an answer for rural America. We need an answer for working America. And so far, neither party has really come through. So that's the purpose of that. I'm going to end with something kind of fun, sort of. This is a poll that is American Polling LLC, and I think I saw this. They ask you to take their presidential survey, but the only answer you're allowed to give, the only one that they respond to, is pushing button 1, which is support for President Trump. And Paydirt, by the way, is part of the Daily Beast. It's a little. I got an email from Paydirt. I'm not sure what it is. It must be some division of the Daily Beast, but they gave a lot of detail. You won't be able to read this necessarily on the Daily Beast, but I thought you'd be interested in it. Thank you for supporting President Trump. Even if you press 2, it's press 1 to support Trump, press 2 for Joe Biden, 3 for Liz Warren, and 4 for Senator Kamala Harris. Anything other than 1 gets you, thanks for supporting President Trump, bye-bye. Your vote will be counted only once. I think that's a really interesting sign, don't you? I mean, that doesn't exactly express confidence. I don't think it does at all. Anyway, happy Thursday to you all. I'm so glad you're here. It's a beautiful day. I hope you're surviving. I hope you and your loved ones are staying safe. Please take care of each other. You know that I love you, and I'll see you tomorrow, and we got some big stuff going on tomorrow. So hope to see you then. And let's see, what shall we look at? What pretty things shall we look at? How about the Devo Shield? I'm really looking at this. I think I might need to have one. That might make my grocery shopping trips all the more fun. Anyway, I will talk to you all later. Take care. Bye.